I was halfway through installing a new security camera over my garage when I heard the sharp, unmistakable knock of trouble. 3 short raps, aggressive and impatient. I wiped my hands on my jeans and opened the door to find 2 strangers in matching polos that said, HOA Property Compliance Division. Behind them stood Jolene Hartford, our HOA president, and menace of the cul-de-sac, squinting at me like I just graffitied her Lexus. Isaac McCall? The taller one asked, clipboard in hand. Yeah, what's this about? We're here to conduct a surprise inspection of your property per HOA bylaws, Section 12.4. He recited like a robot. Jolene stepped forward, lips pursed and arms crossed tight enough to strangle a small child. You were warned about the unauthorized camera installation, Isaac. We take neighborhood security and aesthetics very seriously. It's a Ring camera, I said, gesturing toward the half-mounted device. It's not even on yet. You didn't submit a modification request, she snapped. The HOA must approve all external changes to the property facade. Now let my inspectors do their job. Inspectors, right? The 2 guys looked like they got lost on their way to a mall kiosk. Do you have identification? I asked. They exchanged glances. One of them, the shorter guy with a weak chin, pulled out a laminated card. It said, HOA Compliance Specialist in Comic Sans, and didn't list an agency, license number, nothing. I took a photo of it before he could pull it back. Thanks, I said. You'll need this later. Jolene scoffed. Isaac, you're being uncooperative. We'll be issuing a fine. I let them through, but I followed the inspectors closely. They walked around my property with cheap clipboards, jotting notes and whispering to each other like middle schoolers trying to cheat on a test. One of them actually tried to open my side gate without asking. I stopped him with a firm, "You touch that latch, and I'll call the cops." He froze. "We're authorized." "No, you're not. And unless you've got a warrant or a real license, this inspection ends at the front yard." Jolene was fuming. "You're obstructing official HOA business. You're abusing your position," I shot back. "And unless these guys are licensed inspectors, which they're not, you've just trespassed and impersonated regulatory personnel." The taller guy's face turned pale. "We're volunteers." "Exactly," I said. "And you just participated in an illegal home inspection." I went inside and returned with a folder. I'd been documenting everything since Jolene tried to find me last year for parking my truck half an inch over the sidewalk. That folder was thick photos, emails, bylaws, and records of HOA violations. I held it up. "You've already violated 2 civil codes today. Keep going and I'll make it 3. They left faster than they arrived. Jolene shouted something about a formal citation, but I didn't hear it. I was too busy dialing a number I'd saved months ago. My cousin, a state licensed inspector. "Hey, Eli, I'm sending you photos of some fake compliance guys. Think you can find out if they're certified?" He laughed. "If they're not in the database, they're toast." I smiled. Not because I had one. Not yet. But because the game had just started. The next morning, I was sipping black coffee on my porch when my phone buzzed. Eli had found something, and the tone in his voice when he called wasn't casual. "Isaac, those 2 guys don't exist in any state registry. They're not certified for inspections, property assessments, nothing. I cross-checked all regional licenses. Nada. I already had suspicions, but this made it official." Jolene wasn't just playing power games anymore, she was orchestrating illegal actions under the HOA's name. That changed things. "They tried to enter through my side gate," I said. "They were just volunteers, pretending to be compliance officers." "Yeah, that's impersonation of a licensed professional. Could be a misdemeanor depending on how your county treats it. Also trespassing, unlawful entry, maybe even harassment if they've targeted you before." "They have," I said. "Repeatedly." He paused. "Then you've got grounds." Want me to connect you with the municipal code office? They'll take this seriously. Do it, I said, and send me your statement. Signed. By noon, I had a notarized affidavit from Eli, screenshots of the state registry search, and a case number from the city's Development and Code Enforcement Division. I also filed a police report not for dramatic effect, but to document the impersonation. The officer who took the report, Ruiz, raised an eyebrow when I explained the situation. They posed as inspectors? That's pretty ballsy. Any of them step onto private property. Attempted entry through a locked gate, I said. Didn't get far. Good. That's criminal trespass. And if they claimed they had authority they didn't, that's a separate charge. He asked for security footage. Fortunately, the half-installed ring cam had actually been rolling, just not mounted. I'd set it on the windowsill and it caught everything from the moment they walked up. Ruiz took the footage and shook his head. Yeah, this isn't going away. That night, the neighborhood group chat lit up. Someone had spotted Jolene's SUV parked in front of another house down the street, this time with the same two faux inspectors knocking on doors. But something was different. The homeowners, a retired couple named Frank and Eleanor, weren't the type to roll over. Frank was a former Air Force JAG attorney. Eleanor ran legal aid workshops at the community center. When they opened the door, Frank asked one question: what statute authorizes this inspection? According to another neighbor who overheard the exchange, one of the guys mumbled about Section 12. Frank shut them down cold. That's policy, not law. You're not government agents. You set 1 foot on my property and I'll sue you into next month. The two men shuffled off. But Jolene? She stood on the sidewalk, jaw rigid, watching Frank like she was memorizing his face for vengeance. That's when I realized this wasn't random enforcement. She was targeting anyone who'd questioned her decisions at HOA meetings over the last year. Me, Frank, Eleanor, a few others. I compiled a list from old meeting minutes and cross-referenced it with HOA warning letters. Every person who had voted against one of Jolene's proposals had been cited for trivial violations within the following 2 months. Overgrown hedges, faded mailbox numbers. One guy got fined for having a basketball hoop, even though it had been there for 6 years. I printed the list, attached it to a timeline of citations, and brought it to the Code Enforcement Division the next day. The investigator assigned to my case, a sharp woman named Marisol Chan, read the entire thing without speaking. When she finished, she looked up. "This is retaliation," she said. "Coordinated, too. Can you do something?" "I can do more than that. If she's authorizing fake inspections and issuing citations without due process, she's in violation of multiple city ordinances. The HOA can't enforce rules outside its charter. And if they're impersonating certified personnel, that's criminal." She opened a separate folder, pulling out a form. "We're opening a formal investigation. This will go to the city attorney." By the following Monday, word had gotten around. Jolene's usual morning walk of superiority through the neighborhood had a different tone. Instead of waving and greeting homeowners with that condescending smile, she kept her head down, sunglasses on, and moved fast. No dogs, no clipboard. I was installing a motion sensor light on the side of the house when Frank walked up my driveway. "You stirred the hornet's nest," he said. "She brought it on herself." He nodded. "Eleanor's drafting a letter for the next HOA meeting. We're calling a vote for a special audit. Transparency clause. Can we do that?" "Yup. Section 4, subsection 14. If 25% of homeowners sign the request, the board is required to undergo third-party review. Finances, enforcement actions, the whole thing. I'll get signatures." By Thursday, we had over 40% of the neighborhood on board. People were fed up. It wasn't just me and Frank anymore. Families who'd stayed out of HOA politics were now realizing their dues were being weaponized. That weekend, I got a knock on my door, not aggressive this time. It was Ruiz, the officer who took my original report. He handed me a document. City attorney filed charges. Impersonation of licensed professionals, unlawful entry, and violation of municipal inspection procedures. Against who? The two guys for now, but their statements place responsibility on Jolene. She told them they were authorized. Are they pressing charges? They're claiming they were misled, but they still acted without verification, so they're liable. Both agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency. Which means, she's next. I watched him walk back to his cruiser, document in hand, and felt something shift. Not triumph, just clarity. The system wasn't perfect, but when you knew how to use it, it worked. That night, Jolene posted a frantic message in the HOA bulletin board. Due to unforeseen circumstances, I will be stepping back from my duties until further notice. The next day, a notice arrived in every mailbox. Emergency HOA meeting. Agenda. Investigation findings, temporary board reassignments, and financial disclosure. Her name wasn't on the letterhead. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because if there was one thing I'd learned about people like Jolene, it's that they don't disappear quietly. The emergency HOA meeting was held in the community recreation hall on a gray Saturday morning. Rain tapped steadily against the tall windows, and folding chairs creaked under the weight of more residents than I'd seen at any meeting in 5 years. People weren't here for donuts and landscaping updates, they wanted answers. I sat near the back with Frank and Eleanor, both of them reviewing notes. At the front, a folding table had been hastily arranged with name placards. Only 2 of the 5 board members were present. Jolene's seat was conspicuously empty. Her nameplate had been removed entirely. A man in his 50s with a neatly combed mustache and a weathered leather briefcase stood from the side of the room and walked to the front. His voice was clipped, formal. My name is Anthony Delgado. I've been appointed by the city's Department of Civic Oversight to conduct a temporary audit and oversee this meeting under municipal guidance. Due to the serious nature of recent allegations, the HOA board is under administrative review. No one clapped. No one moved. He flipped open a binder. We've received evidence from multiple homeowners indicating that unauthorized individuals conducted so-called compliance inspections under false pretenses. These actions were directed by the HOA president, who is currently under investigation for criminal misconduct. Heads turned. A murmur rippled through the room. Furthermore, Delgado continued, we have reason to believe that HOA funds were used to compensate these individuals without proper board approval or accounting. All financial records from the past 2 fiscal years have been subpoenaed by the city attorney's office. A woman near the front with a stroller raised her hand. You're saying Jolene paid them with our dues? Delgado nodded once. Preliminary findings indicate payments were made through miscellaneous line items. Misuse of community funds is a violation of both the HOA charter and state statute. Frank leaned toward me. That's embezzlement. I didn't respond. I was watching the 2 remaining board members, Diane and Kevin, shift uncomfortably in their seats. Delgado wasn't finished. Both men who performed these inspections have voluntarily relinquished their involvement with the HOA. Their credentials, though fabricated, were used to intimidate homeowners. The state licensing board has permanently barred them from holding any future inspection certifications, pending further legal action. A man in the row ahead of me turned. Wait, does that mean they're going to jail? They've been charged with misdemeanor impersonation and unlawful surveillance, Delgado said plainly. They accepted a plea deal in exchange for full cooperation. Their statements included text messages and emails from the former HOA president, instructing them to fabricate violations. Eleanor stood. Are you saying she created fake fines? Delgado turned a page. Yes, At least 11 citations were manufactured without any photographic evidence or proper documentation. In some cases, the homes cited were fully compliant at the time of inspection. This constitutes fraud. No one breathed for a long moment. Delgado closed the binder. Given the severity of these violations, the city has frozen all HOA operations that involve enforcement or financial penalties. A temporary oversight committee will manage community affairs until a full election is held. Kevin finally stood, adjusting his blazer like it might shield him from the room's fury. Look, we didn't, Diane and I. This wasn't something we supported. Jolene handled enforcement. We weren't given access to the full ledger. Frank rose slowly. You mean to tell us you approved budgets without reviewing itemized expenses? Kevin's mouth opened, then closed. Diane looked down at her lap. Delgado didn't wait for an answer. All current board members will be interviewed under oath. If evidence suggests they were complicit, additional charges may follow. An older man in the back, Mr. Greeley, who usually kept to himself, stood up. I want to know where the money went. We've had a pothole on Briar Row for 3 years while she was paying actors to play Code Cop. Delgado gave a grim nod. So do we. That's why the audit is being expedited. The meeting ended with a formal vote to dissolve the current board. The tally wasn't close. Every single hand in the room went up. Diane and Kevin left without another word. Outside, the rain had stopped. Frank was already collecting signatures for a reform committee proposal. Eleanor handed out printed information sheets detailing homeowner rights and how to block overreach from any future board. I walked home in silence. The quiet wasn't peace, it was the stillness after a collapse, the kind that leaves behind broken beams and exposed rot. When I got home, there was a voicemail waiting on the landline. I hadn't used it in months. I played it on speaker. It was Jolene. Her voice was tight, like she was trying to stay composed but couldn't quite hold it together. I hope you're satisfied, she said. I gave years of my time to this neighborhood. And you turned it into a witch hunt. I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted order. You'll see what happens when there's no one keeping watch. She hung up without saying goodbye. I deleted the message. 2 days later, a plain white sedan pulled up in front of Jolene's house. A man and woman stepped out wearing state investigator badges. They spoke to her at the door for nearly 20 minutes. When she finally stepped outside, the woman placed a hand on her arm and guided her gently but firmly to the car. I didn't watch her go. I was on my ladder, finishing the mount on my second camera. This one pointed down the street. That evening, Ruiz stopped by one last time. He didn't stay long, just handed me a thin folder. Figured you'd want a copy, he said. Final report. City charges, state action, everything. It's over. I flipped through the pages. There was a section highlighting the use of HOA funds to hire unlicensed personnel, another listing forged citations, and a full appendix of homeowner complaints. The amount misappropriated was just over $74,000. She used our dues like a personal war chest, I said. Ruiz nodded. She's facing multiple felonies. Might not serve real time, but she won't be running any HOA again. I nodded and closed the folder. Thanks. He paused at the edge of my driveway. You know, most people don't fight back. They just pay the fine and grumble. Most people don't have a cousin in state inspection, I said. He laughed once. Still, you didn't let it slide. That makes a difference. He left and I went inside. The camera feed was already live, and I watched it from my laptop, clear, high-definition, time-stamped. A week later, the new Oversight Committee held its first open forum. This time it was different. No raised platforms. No condescending speeches. Just folding chairs arranged in a circle, and everyone talking like neighbors again. Frank was voted interim chair. Eleanor took lead on transparency measures. I agreed to help with tech infrastructure, installing a secure portal for residents to track communications and budgets. The goal wasn't control. It was accountability. There would always be people like Jolene, those who saw power as a tool for control rather than stewardship. But now, the neighborhood had something stronger than rules. It had memory. Frank knocked on my door just after sunrise, still in his running gear, breath visible in the cool air. "Got a minute?" he asked, stepping inside without waiting for me to answer. "City Oversight Committee just pushed something forward you need to see." He unrolled a thin legal packet from under his arm and spread it across my kitchen table. The pages were stamped with a fresh date and bore the seal of the County Superior Court. "This is a subpoena," he said. "City attorney wants access to HOA's restricted financial records, including the Special Maintenance Fund." I narrowed my eyes. "That fund hasn't been touched in years." "That's the thing," Frank said. "It has. Extensively." He flipped to an itemized ledger, clearly printed from the city's financial forensics team. A line item jumped out immediately: contractual security consultation, $18,000. Another listed community surveillance upgrade, $12,450. "None of this was approved," I said, heart rate picking up. "And we've had the same 2 broken street cameras for over a year." Frank nodded grimly. "Turns out Jolene authorized payments to a fake vendor. The consulting firm doesn't exist. It was a shell registered under a relative's name in Nevada." I ran a hand through my hair, suddenly aware of how quiet the house felt. "She laundered it," I said. "She funneled HOA money and disguised it as legitimate expenses." "And that's just the tip," he added. "City investigators traced the funds to a private account. She was moving money out in small amounts over the course of 18 months. Any idea how much?" "Just over 94,000, Frank said. "So far." The kitchen seemed to contract around me. I thought back to the cracked sidewalk on Maple Ridge that had gone untouched for 2 years, the canceled community events, the rising dues. All of it suddenly made sense. "What happens now?" I asked. "She's already been charged with impersonation, trespass, and misuse of authority," Frank said. "But this brings felony-level embezzlement into play. The city attorney's office is filing for a full criminal indictment." I sat down, staring at the numbers. It wasn't just corruption, it was theft, plain and simple. Frank tapped a separate page at the back of the packet. "There's more. These invoices, the ones she used to justify the payments, they were generated using HOA letterhead. She forged board approval signatures." I looked at the names printed on the documents. 2 were familiar, but one stood out. "That's Kevin's signature. He told us he never saw the ledger." Frank opened his phone and showed a photo of a notary affidavit. "He didn't. Signature analysis came back yesterday. All 3 were forged. Kevin's cooperating now." He handed over his email correspondence from the last year. Jolene kept everything off record. Verbal instructions, encrypted text apps, no paper trail unless she made it herself. There was a long pause. Then Frank added, "The city wants you to testify." I raised an eyebrow. "Testify? Me? You were the first to document everything," he said. "The camera footage, the photos, the timeline. They're building a case around that. The DA's office already submitted a request for a deposition next week." I leaned back in the chair. "You think they'll go for the maximum sentence?" "They're going to try," Frank said. "State's attorney is making an example of her. They don't want this happening in other communities." 3 days later, I was in a high-rise downtown, sitting across from 2 prosecutors and a court recorder in a glass-walled conference room. I gave my statement under oath, walking through every incident, every document, every moment since the first fake inspection. They asked specific questions about the HOA's enforcement patterns, her interactions with the community, and whether I had ever been threatened with legal retaliation. They didn't threaten me directly, I said, but she used fines to intimidate. She implied I'd be reported to the city for non-compliance if I didn't cooperate. And you understood those citations to be fabricated? After reviewing the bylaws and comparing them to the footage? Yes. They had no legal standing. The assistant district attorney nodded. That aligns with what the other homeowners reported. You've been instrumental here. I left the building with a cold knot in my stomach. It wasn't nerves, it was the weight of how far this had spiraled. This was no longer a power-hungry board president. It was a criminal case involving fraud, forgery, and tens of thousands in public funds. The week of the arraignment, the courthouse was packed. News vans lined the street, and reporters stood clustered near the entrance, murmuring into microphones as Jolene was escorted in through the side door, flanked by 2 uniformed deputies. She looked smaller than I remembered, not in stature but in presence. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and her usual confidence was gone. She didn't glance at the crowd. Inside, the prosecution laid out a damning case. The shell company in Nevada, the forged invoices, the fabricated citations, all backed by forensic accounting and sworn affidavits. The judge denied bail, citing risk of financial flight. Outside, I found Eleanor holding a clipboard. "We're drafting new bylaws," she said, "stripping enforcement authority from the board unless verified by a third-party compliance officer. No more internal citations." "Good," I said. "It'll prevent this from happening again." "We're also implementing a financial oversight committee," she added. "Every expenditure gets published monthly. Full transparency." Frank joined us a moment later. "And we're pushing for term limits. No one should hold office more than 4 consecutive years." I nodded. "Sounds like a real democracy." That night, I walked the neighborhood. The air felt clearer, the streets quieter. Not in a somber way, but in a way that suggested the tension had finally lifted. Porch lights glowed warmly. Kids played basketball in a driveway without looking over their shoulders. At the next community forum, the turnout doubled. People who'd once stayed silent now asked questions, offered ideas, volunteered for committees. The new board wasn't a group of rulers, it was a circle of neighbors. I didn't run for a position. I didn't need to. Watching the neighborhood rebuild itself was enough. A month later, a letter arrived from the county clerk's office. The case had concluded. Jolene had accepted a plea deal, 3 years probation, a suspended sentence, and full restitution. She was banned from holding any leadership position in a registered HOA for life. Her assets were frozen, and the court ordered the return of misappropriated funds to the community account. The money came back. Slowly, but it came. We fixed the potholes, replaced the broken lights, held a fall festival on the Greenbelt with fresh coffee, cornhole, and a raffle for local businesses. No one mentioned Jolene. Not because we'd forgotten, but because we didn't need to.